Hi, I am Michael Buckoff from BetterTOEFLScores.com, and this is a series of videos that I've been posting each day this week. And if you like this video and the content that I'm posting right now, just below the video to the right, you can click subscribe, and you'll be notified when I publish new content. And my goal here, the beginning of this year, is to begin publishing things almost every day so I can help my YouTube audience learn a little bit more about the TOEFL exam, and most importantly, improve their academic English so they can score higher on the TOEFL exam. Today, I want to talk about TOEFL punctuation tips. So let's take a look at this. This is kind of a joke here. Let's see if you can get so it says why punctuation matters. So let's compare these two sentences. Some people find inspiration in cooking their families and their dogs. Others find inspiration in cooking their families and their dogs. So you notice in the second one, by putting a comma after cooking and families, we now have what's called items in a series. So now it doesn't sound like in the first sentence that people want to cook their families and their dogs, because that's it's kind of ridiculous. Nobody's going to do that. But the point is that how you punctuate in your writing, it can affect the meaning of the sentences that you're writing. Now let's take a look at the first thing. I want to take a look at the semicolon. So it says, one mark when forming the semicolon is the period. Therefore, this punctuation mark is used to join two independent clauses together without a coordinating conjunction. The other mark used to form a semicolon is the comma. Hence, you can think of the semicolon's purpose as joining two independent clauses that have a close relationship. That's how I tell my students at Cal State San Bernardino kind of how to remember that. So the semicolon has both a period and a comma. Okay, let's take a look at the example here. Most bacteria have multiplying capabilities that can quickly spread infectious diseases. Therefore, workers in cafeterias should sanitize the dining tables after every use. This is the first independent clause. This is the second independent clause. So the semicolon is separating these different sentences. Susan spent several hours researching for a last multi-draft project in her English 104 class. She wanted to begin writing the project by the weekend. Similarly, the first independent clause is right here, and then the second one is here. So the semicolon, it can join those independent clauses together. Now, the more complicated one is, nobody will probably tell you this rule. You have semicolons can also be used when expressing items in a series and when one of the items already has commas within it. For example, to prepare for the TOEFL, many students will complete several preparatory steps: a full-length TOEFL level and diagnostic TOEFL test, a consulting session with a qualified TOEFL mentor, completion of an extensive TOEFL course for a specific time frame, and a final TOEFL practice test to assess a test taker's readiness to take the official exam. Now, normally, with items in a series, we use commas to separate those. But what I'm saying is, the first item, because I put a comma after length and a comma after level, that first item has internal commas. So then the only way to separate each item is to separate those items with semicolons. It makes it easier for the reader to understand the different categories. All right, let's take a look at the comma. The comma can be really complicated. I'll give you a really easy rule. The first and foremost rule for commas is, when in doubt, leave them out. So if you don't know, don't put the comma in the sentence. Put it in there if you know why, but don't just put it in there because you think it needs to be in there. You know what the rule is. Okay, here's some tips. It says to separate two independent clauses joined by one of the fanboys. This rule is especially followed if the first independent clause is longer than 7 or 8 words. Example: the reading passage explains 3 important facts about earthquakes, and the speaker in the lecture questions the validity of the author's assertions. So here we have the first independent clause, we have one of the fanboys here, and then we have the speaker in the lecture questions. We have our next independent clause here. So that's a pretty common use of the comma to separate independent clauses in a compound sentence. The next one, to separate an introductory clause or phrase from the main part of the sentence, as in this case. Next time when I attend a concert, I will make sure that I bring some earplugs. Here's the next one. To set off non-restrictive elements from the rest of the sentence. Non-restrictive elements provide additional but not necessary information to the rest of the sentence. So here's an example of a non-restrictive element right here. So we'll say, Cade Riley, who is a 5th grade student, got straight A's on his last report card. So notice, this is called non-restrictive. This is a non-restrictive adjective clause because of the subject. The subject is specific, Cade Riley. So because we have the first and last name there, we already know who this person is with or without this adjective clause. So it's very common to set apart non-restrictive elements with commas. Now contrast that with this one. The student who is in the 5th grade got straight A's on his last report card. In this case, we don't put any commas to separate this adjective clause because it's necessary to identify student. So this is a restrictive element. So you want to remember, restrictive elements don't use commas. Non-restrictive elements you do. So these are some basic rules that you want to think about when it comes to punctuation with your TOEFL writing task, your independent or integrated writing task. I think the better control you have in your punctuation, it also indicates good sentence structure control, and that's going to help you get a higher score on that section of the exam. Okay, now one more thing I want to look at here. I want to talk about punctuation during the speaking section of the TOEFL exam. You probably think I'm crazy, right? Now let's take a look at the rubrics here. It says, under delivery, generally well-paced flow, fluid expression, speech is clear. It may include minor lapses or minor difficulties with pronunciation or intonation patterns which do not affect overall intelligibility. So my question is, how do you indicate punctuation during a TOEFL speaking task? How do you do that? Think about it for a minute. Now, let's go back to one of these sentences here. Remember one I just read here? Let's look at this together. So the question is, how do we indicate punctuation when we're speaking? Cade Riley, who is a 5th grade student, got straight A's on his last report card. So did you notice that right after Cade Riley, when I had the pause there, my tone went up? And then when I read this non-restrictive element, my tone also was slightly higher at the end, and I had a pause, and then it said got straight A's on his last report card. You see what I'm saying? So what I'm saying is you indicate the punctuation during the speaking through your pacing and through your tone. So you also have to practice not just having good punctuation with your writing, but making sure you have good punctuation with your speaking and indicating that punctuation with a change in intonation and also pausing there. Okay, let's take a look at another one here. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So again, the question is, how do we indicate punctuation during speaking? So I'm going to read this out loud so you can hear it. To prepare for the TOEFL, many students will complete several preparatory steps: a full-length TOEFL level and diagnostic TOEFL test, a consulting session with a qualified TOEFL mentor, completion of an extensive TOEFL course for a specific time frame, and a final practice test to assess the test taker's readiness to take the official exam. So did you notice as I was reading that, I'm doing two things. A lot of times I'm pausing right after my commas, right? And in the first case, because I wasn't done with that particular sentence, I had a slightly higher tone at the end of that first thought group. So in addition to understanding the punctuation as it relates to writing, you also need to understand the punctuation as it relates to speaking. If you can master both of those concepts, guess what? You will improve both your writing and your speaking scores on the TOEFL IBT. All right, and like I said in the beginning of this video, if you like this content, if you like this lesson, I'm going to be posting more just like this tomorrow, the next day, and the next week. So just below the video to the right, click on the subscribe so you'll get updated when I post new content. And if you want more information, you can go over to Better TOEFL Scores. In fact, this particular lesson, you don't really see the practice. There's actually, I have a practice test at the end here. So if you want to take a practice test to determine how proficient you are with the comma and the semicolon, just click on the link in the description box of this video for more practice. And thank you for watching.